The officer walks back to your window after checking your license. He hands you a warning ticket and says, "All right, just sit tight for a minute." Most drivers think the stop is basically over at that point, so they relax. They start talking. They answer extra questions. Some even step out voluntarily or agree to a search because they think refusing will look suspicious. And that is exactly where simple traffic stops suddenly become drug investigations, DUI investigations, gun investigations, or obstruction charges. So, what do you do when an officer says, "Just sit tight for a minute"? Can they legally extend a stop? What should you say? And what should you never say? Because the next 60 seconds matter more than most people realize. Every video here could save you from a serious mistake one day. Subscribe now so you don't miss what could protect you. Then share this video and drop your opinion below. I want to hear what you think. A traffic stop is one of the few situations where ordinary people accidentally give away constitutional protections without even noticing it. Not because they're guilty, because they're nervous, because they want the encounter to end, because they think cooperating means answering every question. But one extra sentence can give an officer more time, more suspicion, or even consent they didn't previously have. And once that happens, the stop can change fast. In this video, you'll learn what officers are often looking for after saying, "Just sit tight," what mistakes people commonly make, the exact phrases you can use calmly, and how to protect yourself without escalating the situation. First, understand what may actually be happening when the officer says, "Just sit tight." Sometimes it's completely routine. Maybe dispatch is slow. Maybe the officer is finishing paperwork. Maybe they're waiting on confirmation. But sometimes the officer is trying to extend the stop long enough to investigate something else. That matters legally. In the United States, traffic stops are supposed to be tied to the purpose of the stop itself. Courts have repeatedly looked at whether officers unlawfully prolonged the stop beyond the time reasonably needed to handle the traffic violation. That's why officers often continue casual conversation near the end of a stop. Listen carefully to how it usually sounds. "Where are you headed tonight? You got anything illegal in the car? You mind if I take a quick look? Why are you nervous?" Most people think those are routine friendliness questions. Sometimes they are. But sometimes the officer is looking for consent, inconsistent answers, nervous behavior, or anything that can justify extending the detention further. And this is where mistake number one happens. People start talking too much. The driver says, "Well, officer, I'm actually coming from my friend's place, but I stopped somewhere first, and honestly, I'm tired because we were out late." Now the officer has more details to compare, more chances to spot inconsistencies, more reasons to keep asking questions. Remember this clearly. Silence is not the same as hostility. You can be respectful without volunteering information. A calm response might sound like this: "Officer, am I free to leave or am I being detained?" That sentence matters because it politely forces legal clarity. You are not arguing. You are not resisting. You are identifying whether the stop is actually over. If the officer says you are free to go, leave calmly. Do not restart conversation. Do not linger. Do not suddenly confess nervous explanations nobody asked for. Just leave safely. But if the officer says you are still being detained, the next question becomes important. What is the reason for the continued detention? Again, calm voice, no attitude, because now the officer may need to articulate why the stop is continuing. And this leads to the second major mistake people make. They consent to searches because they think they have no choice. Watch how fast this happens. "Officer, you don't mind if I look inside real quick, do you?" Driver, I guess that's okay." That single sentence can completely change the encounter. Many people do not realize that consent searches are one of the biggest shortcuts around warrant requirements. If you voluntarily agree, you may give officers legal access they otherwise did not have. And courts often treat consent very seriously. That's why your wording matters. A calm response sounds like this: "Officer, I do not consent to any searches." Simple, clear, respectful. Do not add sarcasm. Do not debate constitutional law on the roadside. Do not say, "You're violating my rights." Instead, stay controlled. Officer, I do not consent to any searches. That wording matters because you are not physically resisting. You are verbally refusing permission. Big difference. And here's another important warning. Never physically interfere with a search even if you believe it is unlawful. Do not grab doors. Do not pull items away. Do not block officers. Roadside arguments are not where constitutional disputes get resolved. Courts handle that later. Your goal is to stay safe and avoid additional charges. Now let's talk about the third mistake people make when they hear, "just sit tight." They start making nervous movements. This is one of the fastest ways to escalate a stop. Reaching under seats, digging through bags, suddenly opening the door, turning aggressively. Even innocent movements can create officer safety concerns. Remember, officers are trained to watch hands constantly during traffic stops, so if you need to move, communicate first. Officer, my registration is in the glove compartment. Officer, I am reaching for my wallet. Short, predictable, calm. That lowers tension dramatically. And if the officer orders you out of the vehicle, understand something important. In many situations, officers legally can order drivers and passengers out of a lawful traffic stop. That does not automatically mean you are under arrest. A lot of people escalate because they assume every command is illegal. That is dangerous thinking. You can comply while still protecting your rights. A good phrase here is, "I am not resisting, but I do not consent." That sentence matters because you are separating compliance from permission. You are following commands without agreeing that every action is lawful. Now let's get into another trap people fall into near the end of a stop: trying to talk their way out of suspicion. This happens constantly. Officer, have you had anything to drink tonight? Driver, just one beer. Then 5 minutes later, actually, maybe two. Now the officer is analyzing inconsistencies. Or the driver says, "I'm not drunk, I'm just exhausted." That may unintentionally explain poor driving behavior. People often think more talking equals more innocence. In reality, extra talking frequently creates more evidence. This is where the right to remain silent becomes powerful. And notice something important. Silence usually must be clearly invoked. A respectful statement could be, "I exercise my right to remain silent," or "I would like to speak to a lawyer." Those phrases matter because they clearly communicate your intent. You are not refusing lawful commands like providing identification where legally required. You are declining investigative questioning. That distinction is critical. And remember, laws vary by state and by the specific facts of the encounter. Some states have different identification requirements. Some situations create different legal obligations. This video is educational information, not personal legal advice. But regardless of location, the safest approach during most traffic stops stays remarkably consistent. Stay calm, keep your hands visible, comply with lawful commands. Do not volunteer information. Do not consent to searches. Do not argue constitutional law on the roadside. Do not make sudden movements, and do not confuse being polite with surrendering your rights. Because the moment an officer says, "just sit tight for a minute," the stop may be entering an entirely different phase, and what you say next can absolutely affect what happens afterward. The safest framework is simple. Ask calmly, "Am I free to go or am I being detained?" If questioned further, "I choose to remain silent." If asked for a search, "I do not consent to any searches." If things escalate, "I want to speak to a lawyer." Short statements, clear statements, calm statements. That is what protects people best during police encounters. And in the next video, we're going to break down one of the biggest mistakes drivers make during canine free air sniffs during traffic stops, and why many people accidentally help officers establish probable cause without even realizing it.